Okay, so let me begin with tangent theta. Tangent theta is equal to what? Sine of theta over cosine theta. Cotangent theta is cosine theta over sine theta. Secant theta, it's 1 over cosine theta. Cosecant theta is 1 over sine theta. In some books, sometimes, like in our book, they take this one and they rewrite that funny backward. They go cosine theta equals 1 over secant. Both are the same. They just look different. So our book writes cosine equals 1 over secant. It's also secant equals 1 over cosine. Doesn't matter. Yep, interchangeable. Right. The same thing right here. You can say sine theta, if you want to, equals 1 over cosecant theta. Sine is sine, cosine is cosine. Sine theta, in case you forgot, is the side that's opposite over the hypotenuse. We don't need that for this section. For this section, this is useless. For this chapter even. But just in case you're wondering, or the cosine theta is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Again, I don't use it here. Not in this chapter. Then we have a few more trig identities. We have sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta. That's always equal to 1. Always. And as I said, I can derive 4 more out of this. I can derive more than 4. I'm just going to write 4 of them. The same equation, I'm just going to rewrite that. What will happen if I move sine squared to that side? If I take sine squared to that side, I will have cosine squared theta equals what? 1 minus sine squared theta.
But now you're just doing the algebra of moving it.
Yep, just algebra. What will happen if I take the cosine square there? I'll have sine squared theta equals 1 minus cosine squared theta. Again, I'm doing algebra. Now let's divide each one. I'm going to write here. Let's divide by sine squared. Each one of these. What is sine squared divided by sine squared? 1. What's cosine squared divided by sine squared?
Cosine squared theta over sine squared theta.
Yep, but you can write that as cosine over sine is what? Cotangent. So when you square it, that's cotangent squared theta. What is 1 divided by sine squared? Wait a minute. 1 divided by sine is what? Cosecant, they're going to be squared. Now what about if you divide them? Again, I'm just playing with algebra. By cosine squared theta. So let's take this equation and divide each one by cosine square. What's sine square over cosine square? Sine over cosine is what? Tangent. That'll be a tangent square theta. What's cosine square over cosine squared? 1. And what is 1 divided by cosine? What is it? 1 over cosine is what?
Secant.
That's secant squared. And again, I can move things around here with the algebra. Move the 1 there, make it cotangent squared equals cosecant squared minus 1. Just algebra. But they're all really coming from that identity. Cosine squared plus sine squared is 1. That's where they're coming from. Now, why we need to know that? Because you're going to be asked to simplify trig identities or trig expressions. So let me simplify. Let's take this problem. Simplify tangent theta cosecant theta. The trick really to them is write, I'm going to write it down for you, write each trig. I find that's the easiest way in terms of sine cosine. Sine slash cosine. That's the first step. In the second step, use algebra to simplify your answer. And once in a while, I deviate from that method. You'll see an example later. But that's what I do with every single one. So I take the tangent, which is sine over cosine. Times the cosecant, right, in terms of sine cosine. Cosecant is 1 over sine. And notice now the two of them cancel each other out. I end up with what?
1 over cosine.
1 over cosine. Very good. And what's 1 over cosine?
Secant.
Secant theta. See, start to come back now. That's the end of that example. Try another one. Simplify secant squared y over cotangent y minus tangent cube y. Again, I'm going to follow these steps. Write each one in terms of sine cosine. Secant is 1 over cosine, but that's a square. Cotangent, it's cosine over sine. The tangent is what?
Sine over cosine.
So that's a cube. Sine cube over cosine cube. And again, this is called a compound fraction. A fraction over a fraction is a compound fraction. To simplify that, the quickest way is you multiply the outside times the outside, and you divide it by the inside times the inside. So it's outside over the inside. So my outside here, it's 1 times sine of y, which is what?
Sine y.
Sine y over what?
Cosine cube y.
Cosine cube y, very good. Minus sine cube y over cosine cube y. Notice these two are the same. Use algebra to simplify it. This will be sine y minus sine cube y. Again, I'm trying to simplify more if I can. And usually you don't know it till you play with it. I can factor sine y, one sine out of both of these. So if I take a sine out, what's left? 1 minus sine squared y. Now let me bring my trig identities that we did. 1 minus sine squared. What do you know? It's the first one here. Equal what?
Cosine.
Cosine squared y. Notice I get 2 cosines here, I got 3 in the bottom. 2 of them will cancel. You end up with what?
Sine y over cosine y.
Yes. And what's sine over cosine?
Tangent.
Tangent y. Not bad. See? You're getting much better at it now. I should make everyone sit twice. Let's try another one. There we go. Simplify. Cosecant squared x times 1 minus cosine squared x. Again, I'm going to change everything to sine, cosine, then simplify. Cosecant is 1 over sine squared. 1 minus cosine squared x. Distribute that one. This will be 1 over sine squared x minus, this will be what? Cosine squared divided by sine squared. Again, it's perfect. Actually, I didn't notice it. There's an even easier approach. What's 1 minus cosine squared?
That's 1 minus cosine squared. It's sine squared.
So if I did that substitution here, I would get the answer quicker, right? Because that would give me what? 1 over sine squared x times what? Sine squared x. And these two will cancel each other, you end up with 1. But I didn't see it. My answer is still going to work out. Because this will be what? Sine squared x, 1 minus cosine squared x. What's 1 minus cosine squared?
Sine squared.
So either way, yeah, I forgot this is sine squared. If I plugged in, it's even easier than this. I just didn't see it. And when I do these, honestly, I have no idea. I just grab a path and I go with it. And whatever happens, happens. If it doesn't get me where I need to go, I just try a different approach. But I don't have anything in my mind. I don't even look at this stuff till I show up. So, oh, let me try this, let me try that, and see what will happen. Cosecant x, another one, times, cosecant x minus sine x. Cosecant is 1 over sine. 1 over sine. Again, distribute that one. That's 1 over what? Sine squared minus the 1. I said I'm always going to change sine, cosine, but here I can see something. Because what's 1 over sine squared?
Cosecant.
That's cosecant squared x minus 1. And we have an identity on the board, cosecant. Number 8. That says what? 1 plus cotangent squared theta equals cosecant squared theta. Well, when you move that one to that side, this will change to cotangent squared theta equals what? Cosecant squared theta minus the 1. That's why I have cosecant squared theta minus 1. So I can replace that with cotangent squared theta. I keep forgetting the equal sign. couple more examples. We're making progress. Let's keep it coming. Simplify. Cosine theta times cotangent theta plus sine theta. Again, I'm going to change everything to sine, cosine, and take it from there. That'll be what? Cosine theta over 1 times the cotangent, which is what? Cosine over sine, good. Plus sine theta over 1. I'm making a fraction because I'm laying the foundation for what's coming next. Because this becomes what? Cosine squared theta over sine theta. And this is sine theta over 1. Now I change everything to sine, cosine. Now I'm going to use my algebra to simplify it. So my algebra to simplify it, I need to multiply this by sine theta over sine theta. So that becomes cosine squared theta over sine theta plus sine squared theta over sine theta. Notice the bottom is the same. Make it one fraction. What's cosine squared plus sine squared? 1. 1 over sine theta, which is cosecant theta. One more. Simplify. Secant theta over cosine theta minus tangent theta over cotangent theta. Again, I'm going to change everything to sine, cosine, and use my algebra. Secant is 1 over cosine theta. The cosine is really cosine over 1. The tangent is sine over cosine. Cotangent is the cosine over sine. Again, for both of these, outside over the inside. Multiply the outside over the inside. 1 times 1, it's 1. Cosine times cosine, cosine squared theta. Outside times the outside, inside times the inside. Sine times sine, sine squared theta. Cosine times cosine, cosine squared theta. Notice the bottom is the same. One fraction. One minus sine squared theta. Look on the board.
Yep.
We have 1 minus sine squared to be what? No.
Cosine squared.
Yep, cosine squared theta over cosine squared theta. The result is 1. The key is really to have these. If you have these, then when you say, oh, what's 1 minus sine squared? Cosine squared. What's cosine squared plus sine squared? That's 1. So if you have these handy and you know these, then just change them to sine, cosine, and use the algebra.
Yeah, that's what I missed. I think the first time
Yep.
around is that last 7 through 11.